Welcome to this explainer. Look, the World Cup almost always delivers unmatched drama, right? But that 2026 clash between Portugal and DR Congo down in Houston, wow, nobody could have written that script. Today, we're bringing full sports broadcaster energy to break down the sheer dramatic roller coaster of this unbelievable matchup. We're going to use the exact moments from the broadcast to uncover how a heavily favored giant stumbled, how an underdog roared, and how one player's split brilliance literally shifted the tectonic plates of the entire tournament. Let's get into it.
Okay, let's dive right in with the absolute peak of the match. The commentator screaming, "The Leopards pounce, the Leopards roar. We have history in Houston." Just one of those unforgettable pieces of commentary that completely shocked everyone watching live. We're starting right here at the climax because, well, it perfectly establishes the insanely high stakes of this David versus Goliath story. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated sporting magic. But to really understand the weight of that roar, we've got to rewind the clock and look at exactly what led up to it.
Section 1. The weight of expectations, a Goliath's pressure. Before we get to that historic roar, we really need to set the scene and understand the immense pressure these favorites faced stepping onto the pitch.
Heading into Houston, the mindsets of these two squads couldn't have been more different. On one side, you have Portugal's camp, carrying the massive weight of a star-studded roster, a huge crowd draw, and some really intense coaching rumors. And then, on the other side, you have DR Congo. Their strategy was simple but incredibly effective. A highly committed defense, totally dialed in, patiently waiting to hit hard in transition. It's basically the classic setup for a trap game if the favorites aren't careful.
And for those massive expectations for Portugal, they were completely personified by one man. The broadcast captured the stadium's atmosphere perfectly, noting, there he is, the one they have all come to, Cristiano Ronaldo. Whenever he appeared on the pitch, or even just flashed up on the big screen during the build-up, the crowd went absolutely wild. That kind of reception, it just cements the high expectations for the Portuguese squad. Literally everyone in the building was expecting an absolute masterclass from the favorites.
Adding a whole other layer to that pre-match tension, we've got to look at the sideline. Head coach Roberto Martinez was incredibly animated in the huddle with his players. See, he'd just spent the previous day fielding pointed questions about his long-term future as the head coach. He tried his best to avoid getting involved in the chatter, but the reality was looming right over him. His contract runs out right after this tournament finishes. So every single decision, every substitution, every drop pass, it was all being heavily scrutinized.
Which brings us to Section 2, a historic leopard roar, the underdog strike. Let's see how all this pressure built up, allowing the underdogs to completely flip the script on the world stage.
So this is where highly committed defense and transition strategy we talked about earlier paid off in the ultimate way. Through some brilliant chance creation, working in combination with Cedric Bakambu and just sheer relentless determination, DR Congo achieved a monumental milestone. They scored their first ever World Cup goal. I mean, just imagine the sheer elation of that moment. They didn't just hold off a European powerhouse. They struck back, proving that on any given match day, anything is possible.
But you know, DR Congo's impact on this match wasn't just limited to that historic goal. The game was filled with deeply emotional and really spectacular moments from their side. The broadcast highlighted a beautiful, touching tribute to the late Diego Jodar, showing he was very much at the forefront of everyone's minds. And out on the pitch, we saw some breathtaking athleticism. This was highlighted by Jules Cano's acrobatics, a near miss that the commentators noted would have been an absolute peach of a goal. Seriously, they were playing with heart and they were playing with serious flair.
Section 3. Portugal's unforced errors, the Goliath stumbles. So, what exactly was happening to the heavy favorites during this incredible underdog surge?
Well, Portugal's massive roster was suddenly stumbling hard. First off, their 31-year-old pillar at the back, their talismanic captain, was visibly struggling with a heel issue. The absolute last thing they needed was to lose their defensive anchor, right? Meanwhile, the offense was completely stalling out. The broadcast pointed out them making 4 passes around the back as they desperately tried to figure out how to push forward. And worst of all, they were just plagued by costly unforced errors. It was a shocking reality for a team with such incredible top-to-bottom talent.
And that creates this unbelievable juxtaposition on the pitch. You have this stagnant Portuguese offense, literally crippling themselves with unforced errors despite having all this massive talent. And directly across from them, a DR Congo squad delivering what the broadcasters rightly called a really game performance. They were bringing energy, total commitment, and fully capitalizing on the favorites' lack of forward momentum.
Section 4. Fernandes turns the tide. The hero emerges. Just when it seemed like a total Portuguese disaster was imminent, hit a dramatic pivot.
By this point, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. The
The commentators on the broadcast actually asked this specific question out loud. Where is Bruno Fernandes? They had mentioned it a couple of minutes prior because Portugal was looking entirely lost. They desperately needed a spark to save their tournament hopes from turning to ash right there in Houston. It's that classic moment in every great sports narrative where you wait to see if a real hero is actually going to emerge. And, well, there he was. Bruno Fernandes stepped up instantly. The broadcast captured the electric turnaround perfectly, saying, "That's the type of thing he can do. He can turn the game in a matter of minutes. And look at that goal scored." Literally, in the blink of an eye, Fernandes flipped the momentum entirely. He secured a crucial, spectacular goal to basically drag the favorites back from the absolute brink. Looking back at the flow of these 90 minutes, it truly was an emotional roller coaster. We started off with the intense pre-match Ronaldo hype and that looming pressure on Martinez. Then we moved right into the shock of the first half, where DR Congo's highly committed defense resulted in that historic goal. After that, we waded through Portugal's mid-game stumbles and those shocking unforced errors. And finally, we hit Fernandez's dramatic game-winning climax. The momentum swings here were just wild from start to finish.
Which brings us to the aftermath. Yes, Portugal survived the Houston scare, mostly thanks to a sudden flash of individual brilliance. But I'll leave you with this final thought to ponder. Despite surviving this massive upset attempt, does a team performance filled with stagnant passing and unforced errors truly earn Roberto Martinez's contract extension? Or did Fernandes simply paper over the cracks of a deeply flawed Goliath? Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking those tough questions, and I'll catch you next time.